The conference room on the 43rd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Chicago, but Max Stone kept his eyes on the architectural plans spread across the mahogany table. 5 years of work had led to this moment. The Morrison Tower project, a mixed-use development that would reshape 3 blocks of the West Loop. His design, his vision. Brilliant work, Max, said the senior partner, closing the portfolio. The client's going to love this. Max nodded, allowing himself a brief smile. At 34, he'd become one of the firm's most reliable architects, the guy who delivered impossible projects on deadline without the ego that plagued so many in the field. He checked his phone. 6:47 p.m. He'd promised Tommy he'd be home for dinner. The drive to Oak Park took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. Max used the time to decompress, switching from work mode to dad mode. Tommy was 7 now, curious about everything, full of questions about how buildings stayed standing and why bridges didn't fall down. Max loved those conversations, loved watching his son's mind work through problems. The house was a renovated Victorian they'd bought 3 years ago, mostly with money from Max's bonuses. Melissa had insisted on Oak Park, closer to her parents in River Forest, she'd said. At the time, Max hadn't thought much of it. Now, he thought about it constantly. He found Tommy in the living room, building an elaborate Lego structure that defied gravity in interesting ways. "Hey, buddy, that's impressive." Tommy looked up, his face lighting up. "Dad, I made a cantilever like you showed me." Max knelt down to examine the construction, genuinely impressed. "You sure did. That's perfect weight distribution." "Dinner's ready," Melissa called from the kitchen, her voice flat. She'd set 3 plates at the kitchen table, not the dining room. That was new. Or maybe not new. Max tried to remember the last time they'd eaten in the dining room, when it was just the 3 of them. The room seemed reserved now for when her parents visited, which happened with increasing frequency. Melissa had been beautiful when they met 9 years ago. She still was, objectively. Dark hair, striking features, the kind of presence that drew attention at parties. But something had shifted over the years. Max couldn't pinpoint exactly when. Maybe after Tommy was born. Maybe before. She'd grown distant, critical, always finding fault with how he did things, how he parented, how he lived. "How was your day?" Max asked, serving Tommy some chicken. "Fine." Melissa didn't look up from her phone. "Your father called." "Again?" "Okay. What did he want?" "I don't know." I didn't answer. She said it like Max should have known better than to ask. Rex Stone called Max every few days, usually just to check in, talk about baseball, see how Tommy was doing. Melissa had never warmed to Rex, despite his unfailing politeness toward her. She found him rough around the edges, which was her polite way of saying he hadn't grown up with country club privileges like Vincent and Wanda Ham. Max's father had built a successful construction company from nothing, starting as a laborer and working his way up through sheer determination and strategic thinking. He'd put Max through architecture school without loans, never making him feel guilty about it. Rex was tough but fair, the kind of man who kept his word and expected others to do the same. "Mom and Dad want us for Easter dinner," Melissa said, still scrolling through her phone. 2 weeks from Sunday. Max felt his jaw tighten. "That's 3 weeks in a row, Mel. So maybe we could do something just us. Take Tommy to the zoo, have a picnic." She finally looked up, her expression cold. "They're my parents, Max. It's important to them." What Max wanted to say was that he was her husband, Tommy was her son, and maybe they should be important too. What he actually said was, "Sure. Easter dinner." Tommy looked between them, his small face troubled. The kid was perceptive, always had been. Max reached over and ruffled his hair. "Finish up, bud. Then we'll read more of that book about the Brooklyn Bridge." After Tommy was in bed, Max sat in his home office, supposedly reviewing the Morrison Tower revisions, but actually thinking about his marriage. What had it become this hollow thing? They barely spoke. They hadn't touched each other in months. Melissa spent most of her free time at her parents' house in River Forest, often taking Tommy with her. Vincent and Wanda Ham lived in a sprawling Tudor that Vincent had bought with family money, old money, the kind that came with expectations and judgment. Vincent had run a real estate investment firm, though Rand was generous. He'd inherited the business from his father and mostly coasted on reputation, while Herbert, Melissa's younger brother, did the actual work. Max had never liked Vincent. The man was controlling, dismissive, the type who believed his money made him superior. He spoke to service workers like they were beneath him, made racist comments he called jokes, and had opinions about everything from politics to parenting that he delivered like gospel. But Melissa worshipped her father. She always had. Vincent was brilliant. Vincent was successful. Vincent knew best. Never mind that he'd inherited everything he had. Never mind that he treated Wanda like a servant in her own home. Melissa saw only what she wanted to see. Max's phone buzzed. A text from Rex. Call when you can. Nothing urgent. Love you, son. He smiled despite his mood and dialed. Hey, Dad. Max. How's my favorite architect? Tired. Just got Tommy down. How are you? Can't complain. Well, I could, but nobody'd listen. Rex chuckled. Listen, I wanted to ask about Tommy's birthday next month. I was thinking about taking him to that Cubs game, the one against the Cardinals. Would that work? He'd love that. Yeah, that works. There was a pause. How are things, son? Really? Max leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Rex had always been able to read him. They're complicated. Melissa's still giving you the cold shoulder? That's one way to put it. And you're still eating dinner at Vincent Ham's every Sunday like a good little soldier. Easter in 2 weeks. Rex was quiet for a moment. Max, I'm your father, so I'm going to say something, and you can tell me to mind my own business if you want. Go ahead. That family is poison. Vincent Ham is a bully and a coward, the worst kind. He hides behind his money and his name, treats people like garbage, and thinks he's better than everyone because his grandfather made some smart investments in the 20s. Wanda enables everything he does. And Melissa, Dad, I know, you love her, but love shouldn't make you miserable, son. And I can hear it in your voice. You're miserable. Max couldn't argue. I keep thinking it'll get better. Has it gotten better? No. Then it's not going to. People don't change unless they want to, and nothing I've seen from that family suggests they want to change anything. After they hung up, Max sat in the dark office for a long time. His father was right, as usual. The question was what to do about it. Tommy was young, barely 7. A divorce would devastate him. And knowing Vincent Ham, the man would make it as ugly as possible, would use his money and connections to make Max's life hell. No, Max decided. He'd ride it out. For Tommy's sake. The kid needed stability, needed both parents, even if those parents barely tolerated each other. Max had grown up in a happy home with 2 parents who loved each other. He wanted that for Tommy, even if he couldn't quite deliver on the love part. It was a compromise like everything is life these days. Max Stone, the architect who designed soaring towers and impossible structures, had somehow designed himself into a cage. The 2 weeks until Easter passed in their usual pattern. Max worked long hours on the Morrison Tower project, came home to silent dinners, read to Tommy before bed, then retreated to his office. Melissa spent most afternoons at her parents' house. Tommy went with her sometimes, came back quieter each time. Dad, Tommy asked one night while Max was tucking him in. Why does Grandpa Vincent talk to you like that? Max's hand stilled on the blanket. Like what, buddy? Like you're dumb or something. You're not dumb. You build buildings. Out of the mouths of babes. Max chose his words carefully. Some people talk down to others to make themselves feel important. It doesn't mean anything. I don't like it when he does that. I know. Me neither. Why doesn't Mom tell him to stop? That was the question, wasn't it? It's complicated, Tommy. Families are complicated sometimes. Our family's not complicated. You and me, we're not complicated. Max felt something catch in his throat. No, buddy, we're not. Easter Sunday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of spring day Chicago only got a few times a year before summer heat set in. Melissa had laid out Tommy's outfit that morning. Dress pants, a button-down shirt, a clip-on tie. Max had suggested maybe they could dress down a little since it was just family, and Melissa had given him a look that could freeze water. The drive to River Forest took 20 minutes. Vincent and Wanda's tutor sat behind an iron gate on a street lined with similar estates. Herbert's car was already in the circular driveway, a new BMW, probably leased with company funds. Wanda answered the door in a yellow dress and pearls, her face pulled tight, from too many procedures. Melissa, darling. And Tommy, don't you look handsome? Max. She said his name the way someone might say taxes. The house smelled like ham and expensive furniture polish. Vincent held court in the living room, a bourbon already in his hand despite it being barely noon. Herbert sat beside him, nodding at whatever their father was saying. There's my girl. Vincent boomed when he saw Melissa. He hugged her, then turned to Tommy. And my grandson. Getting big, aren't you? Hi, Grandpa, Tommy said quietly. Vincent's eyes slid to Max, barely acknowledging him with a nod. Maxwell. No one called him Maxwell except Vincent Ham, who knew Max hated it and did it anyway. Small power plays, constant reminders of the hierarchy Vincent had established. Dinner wouldn't be served for another hour. Wanda was strict about timing, so Max found himself trapped in the living room, listening to Vincent pontificate about politics, real estate, and the decline of American values. Herbert chimed in occasionally with supporting comments. Melissa sat close to her father, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm. Max had watched this dynamic play out dozens of times. Vincent was the sun around which everyone orbited. Wanda catered to his every whim. Melissa competed for his approval. Herbert worked to earn his respect. And Max. Max was the outsider, tolerated because he'd given Vincent a grandson. You know what I heard? Vincent said, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant a story was coming, one designed to make someone feel small. That new building going up downtown, the Morrison Tower? Apparently the architecture firm went 20% over budget on the design phase. 20%. Bunch of prima donnas, architects. Think they're artists instead of draftsmen. Max felt Melissa's eyes on him, but kept his expression neutral. He wasn't about to explain that budget overruns happened, that the Morrison Tower's overrun was actually due to client-requested changes after the fact, or that his firm had absorbed most of the cost to maintain the relationship. Vincent didn't want facts. He wanted submission. I've always said architects are glorified sketch artists, Vincent continued. The real work gets done by builders, construction guys who actually understand reality. Rex Stone flashed through Max's mind. His father, who actually built things, who taught Max respect for both design and execution. Rex would have had words for Vincent Ham, none of them polite. Dinner. Wanda called from the dining room. The table was set like something from a magazine. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver candlesticks. Tommy's place was next to Max, across from Herbert. Vincent sat at the head, naturally with Melissa to his right and Wanda to his left. The meal started normally enough. Wanda had outdone herself with the ham, the sides, the rolls. Conversation was light, mostly Vincent telling stories about deals he'd made, properties he'd sold, his genius at reading the market. Tommy was being good, eating quietly, occasionally asking polite questions. Max felt proud of his son. How well-behaved he was despite the tension Max knew the kid could sense. Then Tommy reached for his water glass, his small hand misjudging the distance. Everything happened in slow motion and too fast at once. The glass tipped, water spreading across the white tablecloth toward Vincent's plate. Tommy's face went white with panic. I'm sorry. The crack of Vincent's palm across Tommy's face echoed like a gunshot. Tommy fell sideways out of his chair, hitting the hardwood floor with a thud. The room froze. Max's heart stopped, then started, pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Vincent stood over Tommy's crumpled form, his face red with rage. That's how we teach respect in this house. You don't make messes at my table. Max was moving before he consciously decided to, pushing back from the table, but Melissa kept eating. Her fork moved to her mouth like nothing had happened. Wanda actually laughed, a nervous titter that made Max's vision go red. He reached Tommy, pulling his son into his arms. There was a red handprint blooming on the boy's cheek, tears streaming down his face. Tommy was trying not to cry out loud, just shaking in Max's arms. We're leaving, Max said, his voice deadly calm. Sit down, Vincent commanded. The boy needs to learn. You hit my son. I disciplined him. Something you clearly don't do enough of. Max stood, Tommy in his arms, and started for the door. Then a hand grabbed his arm. Rex Stone stood in the entryway, still in his jacket from outside. Max hadn't even heard him arrive. His father's face was carved from granite, his eyes cold in a way Max had rarely seen. "Sit down, son," Rex said quietly. "Dad, we're leaving." "Sit down." Rex pulled out his phone, his eyes never leaving Vincent Ham's face. "I hope you don't mind a few extra guests, Vincent." The front door opened. Santos Salas walked in first, 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle in an expensive suit, his face impassive. Pedro McCoy followed, shorter but radiating the same controlled menace. Behind them came three more men Max didn't recognize, all dressed in suits that barely concealed their builds. The entire room went dead silent. Vincent's face had gone pale. What is this?" Rex walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down like he owned the place. This is a conversation, Vincent. The kind men have when one of them makes a serious mistake." He gestured to the empty chairs. "My associates will join us. Max, take Tommy to the kitchen. Get some ice on that cheek." Max didn't move. His mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. "Now, son," Rex said gentler. "I've got this." In the kitchen, Max held ice wrapped in a towel against Tommy's face. His son had stopped crying, but was still shaking. "Am I in trouble?" Tommy whispered. "No, buddy. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. Grandpa was mad. Grandpa was wrong." Max pulled Tommy closer. "Nobody gets to hit you, Tommy. Nobody. Not ever." Through the doorway, Max could hear voices, Rex's, calm and measured, and Vincent's, growing increasingly shrill. Max couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Whatever Rex was saying, Vincent didn't like it. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then Santos appeared in the doorway. "Your father wants you back in there," he said. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "You can bring the boy if you want." Max carried Tommy back to the dining room. The scene had transformed. Vincent sat slumped in his chair, his earlier bravado gone. Wanda looked terrified. Herbert was pale, his hands clasped in front of him. Melissa was still at the table, but now she looked uncertain, her eyes darting between her father and Rex. Rex stood by the window, his silhouette backlit by afternoon sun. "Max, I need you to listen very carefully. Can you do that?" Max nodded, Tommy still in his arms. "Vincent and I have reached an understanding. He's going to apologize to Tommy. Then you and Melissa are going to have a conversation about your marriage, because it's clear some things need to change. And Vincent and I are going to have a separate conversation about respect and consequences. Does that sound fair?" It wasn't really a question. Max saw the fear in Vincent's eyes and realized, suddenly, exactly who his father was. Rex Stone wasn't just a successful contractor. The men in suits, the way Vincent had gone white at their arrival, the power dynamic that had flipped in seconds. Rex had connections Max had never fully understood, the kind that came from decades in Chicago construction and all the politics and arrangements that entailed. Vincent cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "Tommy, I apologize for striking you. It was inappropriate." Tommy pressed his face into Max's shoulder. "Not good enough," Rex said quietly. "Try again, Vincent. Like you mean it." Vincent's jaw worked. "I'm sorry, Tommy. I lost my temper. I was wrong to hit you. It won't happen again." "It better not," Rex said. He looked at Max, "You and Melissa talk." Now, the study. The study was Vincent's private domain, walls lined with leather-bound books he'd never read and expensive bourbon he definitely had. Melissa shut the door behind them, her face flushed. "I can't believe you brought your father here." Max stared at her. "You can't believe. Mel, your father just hit our son. He hit Tommy hard enough to knock him out of his chair. And you kept eating. It was discipline. It was assault." Max's voice rose before he caught himself, remembering Tommy was just outside. He lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "He's 7 years old. He spilled water. And your father slapped him hard enough to leave a handprint. Where was the mother who protected her child?" Melissa's face hardened. "My father knows how to teach respect. Tommy needs to learn there are consequences." "For spilling water?" Max shook his head, seeing his wife, clearly maybe for the first time in years. "You're not going to defend him, are you? You're not going to defend our son." "I don't need to defend him from my father." "Yes, you do. That's exactly what you need to do. You need to be his mother first, Vincent's daughter second. But you've never been able to do that, have you?" Your father comes first. Always has. Melissa's eyes flashed. At least my father was successful enough to give me a good life. At least he didn't spend 40 years hauling bricks and working construction. There it was. The real Melissa, the one who thought she was better than everyone because of the house she'd grown up in and the money she'd never earned. Max felt something break inside him. Not his heart, that had been breaking slowly for years. Something else. Some final obligation, some last thread of hope that they could fix this. We're done, he said quietly. What? This marriage. We're done. I'll file the papers this week. You can't just. Yes, I can. And I am. You stood by while your father assaulted our son. That's not something I can forgive, Mel. That's not something I should forgive. My father will destroy you in court. His lawyers. Let him try. Max opened the study door. I'm taking Tommy home. You can stay here with your family. Pack your things this week. I want you out. He expected her to argue, to threaten, to cry. Instead, she just looked at him with cold contempt. You'll regret this. No, Max said. I really won't. In the dining room, Rex was standing by the window, the men in suits positioned around the room like sentries. Vincent sat at the table, head in his hands. Wanda was crying quietly. Herbert wouldn't meet Max's eyes. We're leaving, Max said. Tommy, say goodbye to Grandpa Rex. Bye, Grandpa, Tommy said from Max's arms, his voice small. Rex crossed to them, touching Tommy's cheek gently. You're going to be fine, buddy. Your dad's got you. I know. At the door, Max paused, looking back. Vincent lifted his head, and their eyes met. Max saw fear there, real fear, and something else. Calculation. Vincent Ham was beaten today, but he wasn't the type to stay beaten. Rich men never were. They hired lawyers, called in favors, used money like a weapon. Well, Max thought, walking to his car with his son in his arms, let him try. Max had spent 5 years designing buildings that could withstand earthquakes, wind shear, the immense forces of nature. He understood structural integrity, weight distribution, finding the weak points in any system. Vincent Ham was about to learn that Max Stone understood destruction too. The house felt different without Melissa. Quieter, cleaner. Max hadn't realized how much tension she'd brought into every room until it was gone. She'd taken her things while Max was at work, leaving only a note about her lawyer contacting him and a forwarding address in River Forest. She'd moved back in with her parents, of course. Tommy adjusted better than Max expected. They'd established new routines, breakfast together, Max taking him to school, pick up from aftercare, dinner, homework, reading time. On weekends, they went to museums, parks, Cubs games. Slowly, Max watched his son relax, smile more, stop jumping at sudden movements. The handprint faded after a few days, but Max took pictures of it first. Then he took Tommy to a pediatrician and had the injury documented. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, didn't ask many questions but made detailed notes and took her own photographs. Just in case, she said, meeting Max's eyes with understanding. Rex came over twice a week for dinner. He never mentioned what had happened after Max left on Easter, but Max noticed Vincent Ham's name appearing in the news with increasing frequency. A building inspection at one of his properties found code violations. The IRS announced an audit of Ham real estate investments. A former employee filed a discrimination lawsuit. That's a lot of bad luck for one man, Max observed one evening while Rex helped with dishes. Is it? Rex dried a plate, his face neutral. I wouldn't know anything about that. Dad, your father-in-law made enemies, Max. That's what happens when you treat people like garbage for 40 years. Eventually, they remember. Rex set down the plate. But that's not your concern. Your concern is Tommy and building your case. Max had hired a lawyer, not the expensive downtown type, but a woman named Samantha Browning who specialized in family law and came highly recommended by a colleague. She was sharp, methodical, and didn't sugarcoat reality. Vincent Ham has money and connections, she told Max at their first meeting. He'll make this ugly. We need to document everything. The assault on Tommy, Melissa's neglect, the hostile environment. And we need to be prepared for them to dig into your life. They'll look for anything they can use. Let them look, Max said. I've got nothing to hide. The Morrison Tower project was nearing completion, which gave Max something to focus on beyond the divorce proceedings. The building was beautiful, everything he'd hoped it would be. Steel and glass rising 47 stories, the facade catching light in ways that shifted throughout the day. It would be his legacy, the thing he'd be remembered for. But lately Max had been thinking about a different kind of legacy. His father had built things too, just with concrete and lumber instead of architectural plans. Rex had also built something else, a network, relationships, the kind of power that didn't announce itself but was real nonetheless. The kind of power that could make a man like Vincent Ham very nervous. "Dad," Max said one evening after Tommy was in bed. "Who are Santos and Pedro?" Rex looked up from his coffee. "Friends of mine." "What kind of friends?" "The kind who help when help is needed." Rex studied Max's face. "You want to know who I really am?" "I know who you are. You're my father. I'm also a man who spent 40 years in Chicago construction, which means I know people. The kind of people who get things done. The kind who remember favors and don't forget debts." Rex leaned back. "When you were growing up, I kept that world separate. I wanted you to have a clean life, to build something legitimate. You did that. You became an architect, a good one. But now you're in a fight with a man who plays dirty, and you need to understand the tools available to you." Max absorbed this. "What happened after I left on Easter? Vincent and I had a conversation about respect, about consequences, about what happens to men who hurt children." Rex's voice was mild, but his eyes were hard. "I explained that if anything happened to you or Tommy, anything at all, there would be repercussions." He understood. The building inspections, the IRS. Like I said, the man made enemies. I just helped them remember. Rex set down his coffee cup. "Max, you're going to win this divorce, and you're going to get full custody of Tommy. Melissa abandoned him when it mattered. The court will see that. But Vincent's going to try to hurt you first. Financially, professionally, any way he can. You need to be ready." "I am ready." "Are you?" Rex leaned forward. "Because I'm offering you more than moral support here, son. I'm offering you the tools to fight back. Really fight back. The question is whether you're willing to use them." Max thought about Tommy's face when Vincent had hit him, the shock and pain and confusion. He thought about Melissa eating dinner like nothing had happened, her mother laughing, the years of small humiliations and dismissals. He thought about what kind of message he'd send his son if he just rolled over and let Vincent Ham crush them because he had more money and better lawyers. "What did you have in mind?" Max asked. Rex smiled. "First, we make sure your divorce goes smoothly and you get custody. That's the priority. But while that's happening, we build a case against Vincent that has nothing to do with family court. We find his weaknesses. And trust me, men like him always have weaknesses, and we exploit them. Legal weaknesses? Some legal. Some less so." Rex met Max's eyes. "I'm not going to ask you to break any laws you're not comfortable breaking. But I'm going to tell you that men like Vincent Ham don't play fair, and if you fight them fair, you lose. They've rigged the game. The only way to win is to change the game entirely." Over the next 3 weeks, Max learned things about his father-in-law that made him sick. Rex's connections went deep. Accountants, lawyers, real estate agents, even some of Vincent's own employees. They painted a picture of a man who'd built his empire on exploitation and fraud. Vincent Ham hadn't just inherited his father's business, he'd systematically looted it. Over 20 years, he'd inflated property values for investors while understating them for tax purposes. He'd used company funds for personal expenses, disguising them as business costs. He discriminated against tenants based on race and ethnicity, using coded language in emails and texts that any decent lawyer could decode. The IRS audit Rex had triggered was just the beginning. With the right evidence, Vincent could face criminal charges, tax evasion, fraud, fair housing violations. The kind of charges that came with prison time. "The information is there," Rex explained, spreading documents across Max's kitchen table. "We got people on the inside copying files, recording conversations. Everything we're gathering is admissible because we're not stealing it. Employees have a right to document illegal activity. But someone has to compile it, package it, and deliver it to the right authorities. Why not just do it now?" "Timing." Rex tapped the table. "Right now, Vincent thinks he's got the upper hand in your divorce. He's got expensive lawyers filing motions, trying to paint you as an unfit father. Let him waste his money, waste his time. Meanwhile, we build our case. Then, when he least expects it, we drop everything at once. Federal prosecutors, the Illinois Attorney General, the media. We don't just beat him in family court. We destroy him completely. Max looked at the documents, the evidence of years of corruption and cruelty. How long? 3 months. Maybe 4. We need everything airtight. One chance to get this right. It felt wrong in a way. Max had never been the vengeful type, had always believed in playing by the rules, trusting systems to work. But the rules were written by people like Vincent Ham, and the systems protected them. Sometimes, Max realized you had to break the system to get justice. Okay, he said, let's do it. The divorce proceedings moved forward with painful slowness. Melissa's lawyers filed motion after motion, each one designed to delay and drain Max's resources. They claimed he was the primary aggressor in the marriage, that he'd alienated Tommy from his mother, that his work schedule made him an unsuitable primary caregiver. Samantha Browning deflected each attack methodically, but Max could see the strain. They're going to try to provoke you, she warned. Don't take the bait. Stay calm. Stay focused on Tommy. The custody evaluation was scheduled for mid-June. A court-appointed psychologist would assess both parents, interview Tommy, and make recommendations to the judge. It was the most critical part of the case. Max prepared like he was defending his dissertation. He documented everything. His daily routine with Tommy, the boys' school performance, his health records. He coached Tommy gently about being honest with the evaluator, about not being afraid to say how he felt. Will I have to see Grandpa Vincent? Tommy asked the night before his interview. Not if you don't want to, buddy. I don't want to. He's mean. Tommy's face was serious, older than 7 should be. And Mom, she doesn't want to be with us, does she? Max felt his heart break a little. I think your mom loves you, Tommy. She makes bad choices sometimes. She lets Grandpa Vincent make decisions for her instead of thinking for herself. That's dumb. Yeah, buddy. It is. The custody evaluation took 3 weeks. The psychologist, Dr. Gerald Morrison, interviewed Max twice, Melissa twice, and Tommy 3 times. He visited Max's house and Melissa's apartment at her parents' estate. He reviewed school records, medical records, the photographs of Tommy's bruised face. When the report came back, Samantha called Max immediately. You're going to want to sit down. Max sat in his home office, phone pressed to his ear. What's it say? Dr. Morrison recommends full physical custody to you with supervised visitation for Melissa. He cites the assault on Easter, Melissa's failure to protect Tommy, and what he calls enmeshment with paternal grandparents that compromises her parenting judgment. Samantha paused. Max, this is about as good as these reports get. Vincent's lawyers are going to fight it, but we've got the high ground now. Max closed his eyes, relief washing through him. What happens next? We go before the judge in 2 weeks. Vincent will try to discredit Dr. Morrison's findings, probably claim bias or inadequate investigation. But the photographs of Tommy's face, the pediatrician's notes, Dr. Morrison's credentials, it's a strong case. Very strong. After hanging up, Max sat alone in his office, letting himself feel the weight of the past months lift slightly. Tommy was safe. That was what mattered. The rest, the revenge, the evidence they were gathering against Vincent, the looming destruction of his father-in-law's life. All of that was secondary to protecting his son, but it would still be satisfying as hell. Rex came over that evening with takeout and news. We got everything we need on Vincent. Tax records, communications, testimony from former employees. Herbert sang like a canary once we explained his options. Testify against his father or go down with him. Smart kid, despite his gene pool. Herbert's cooperating. Turned out he's been keeping his own insurance policy for years. Vincent treated him like garbage, made him do all the actual work while taking credit. Herbert's got copies of everything. Emails where Vincent instructs him to inflate values. Texts discussing tenant discrimination. Recordings of meetings where they plan to defraud investors. The prosecutors are calling it a gift. Max felt a grudging respect for Herbert Ham. When does it go public? After your custody hearing. 2 weeks, maybe 3. We want you clear of the legal system first. Don't want anything to complicate your case. Rex cracked open a beer. Vincent's gonna fall hard. Max prison time, probably 5 to 7 years. Asset forfeiture, fines. The whole real estate empire will collapse. And everyone's gonna know what he did, who he really was. What about Melissa? She wasn't involved in the business, so she's clean legally. But she'll lose everything. The apartment, the lifestyle, the family money. It'll all be gone. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. 2 weeks later, Max walked into the Cook County Family Courthouse with Tommy's hand in his. Samantha met them in the hallway, looking confident in a navy suit. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." The hearing room was smaller than Max expected. Judge Patricia Brennan presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. Vincent and Wanda sat behind Melissa and her legal team, looking expensive and angry. Herbert was notably absent. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Vincent's lawyers tried everything, challenged Dr. Morrison's methodology, suggested Max had coached Tommy, implied the Easter incident was exaggerated. Samantha calmly presented the evidence. Photographs, medical records, the psychologist's detailed report, Tommy's own testimony given to the evaluator. Then Samantha called a surprise witness, Dr. Patel, Tommy's pediatrician, who testified about the injury severity and her concerns about the child's safety. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Patel said, her voice clear and firm, "the injury I documented was consistent with a forceful strike from an adult. The child showed signs of trauma, hypervigilance, fear responses, reluctance to discuss what happened. These are not signs of a child making up stories. These are signs of a child who is hurt and is afraid." Max watched Vincent's face go red, but the man stayed silent. He knew better than to cause a scene here. Judge Brennan took a 30-minute recess, then returned with her decision. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented, including Dr. Morrison's comprehensive evaluation. This is a clear case. The father has demonstrated consistent, appropriate parenting. The mother failed to protect the child during a violent incident and has shown poor judgment in prioritizing her father's wishes over her son's welfare." The judge looked directly at Melissa. "Ms. Ham, I don't believe you're a bad person, but I do believe you've made terrible choices, and those choices have consequences. Your son deserves better." The ruling. Max got full physical custody, legal custody, and Melissa got supervised visitation for 6 months, after which they'd reevaluate. Walking out of the courthouse, Tommy squeezed Max's hand. "We won." "Yeah, buddy. We won." That night, while Tommy slept in his own bed in their house, Max called Rex. "It's time," Max said. "You sure?" Max thought about it one last time, made sure this was really what he wanted. Not just revenge, though he'd be lying if he said that wasn't part of it, but justice. For Tommy. For all the people Vincent had hurt over the years. For the principle that men like Vincent Ham shouldn't get away with being monsters just because they had money. "I'm sure." "Okay then," Rex said. "Tomorrow morning, the FBI executes search warrants at Ham Real Estate Investments. By noon, Vincent will be in custody. By evening, he'll be all over the news. And by this time next week, his life as he knows it will be over." "Good," Max said and meant it. The FBI arrived at Ham Real Estate Investments at 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in late June. Max knew the exact time because he was watching the live news feed on his computer while drinking his morning coffee. Tommy was at summer camp, safely away from whatever fallout might come. The cameras caught it all. Federal agents and windbreakers entering the building, boxes of documents being carried out, Vincent Ham being escorted to a waiting car, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. Not the towering patriarch who'd held court over Easter dinner, but a scared old man in an expensive suit. By noon, every major Chicago news outlet was running the story. Prominent real estate investor charged with fraud. FBI raids River Forest Estate. Ham family empire built on tax evasion, discrimination. The indictment was comprehensive. Tax evasion, wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, and violations of the Fair Housing Act. The evidence was damning. 20 years of fraudulent appraisals, falsified tax documents, discriminatory practices, and communications showing deliberate, systematic fraud. Herbert Ham, the indictment noted, had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. His testimony would be crucial to the case. Max's phone rang constantly. Reporters who'd somehow gotten his number, colleagues who'd seen the news and made the connection to his father-in-law, friends checking in. He ignored most of them. This wasn't about publicity or validation. This was about consequences. Samantha Browning called mid-afternoon. "You see the news? Hard to miss. Melissa's lawyer contacted me. She wants to talk to you." "About what?" "Honestly, I think she's panicking. Her father's looking at serious prison time. The family assets are about to be seized, and she just lost custody of her son. Her whole world is imploding." "Good," Max said flatly. "Max, I'm sorry, Sam, but no. She had choices. She chose wrong. I'm done protecting her from the consequences." There was a pause. "Fair enough. I'll tell her lawyer no." Rex came over that evening with Santos and Pedro, who'd become familiar faces over the past months. They brought pizza and beer, sat around Max's kitchen table like old friends. "Vincent made bail," Rex said, "but they seized his passport. He's not going anywhere. Trial's set for September. Federal prosecutor thinks she can get a conviction on at least 8 of the 12 counts." "Eight's enough for serious time," Santos said. His voice was surprisingly soft for such a big man. 5 to 10 years, maybe more with his age and the amounts involved. Max thought about Vincent in prison, surrounded by the kind of people he'd always looked down on, treated like garbage. There was a certain poetic justice to it. What about Wanda and Melissa? Wanda's standing by her man, claims she knew nothing. Rex shrugged. Might even be true. Vincent probably kept her in the dark. Easier to maintain plausible deniability. Melissa's cut off communication with everyone, hiding out at her mother's. And Herbert, protected. He testified before the grand jury, gave them everything. He'll rebuild, probably. He's got skills, and he wasn't a mastermind. People will work with him once enough time passes. Over the following weeks, the story dominated local news. More victims came forward, tenants who'd been denied housing based on their race, investors who'd lost money on Vincent's fraudulent deals, employees he'd underpaid and mistreated. The portrait that emerged was of a man who'd spent his entire adult life exploiting others for profit and status. The media found Max, of course. Divorced husband of Vincent Ham's daughter, made for good copy, especially when reporters discovered the custody battle and the assault on Tommy. Max agreed to one interview with a respected investigative journalist from the Chicago Tribune and laid out the facts clearly and calmly. What had happened on Easter, the subsequent divorce, the custody battle. He didn't editorialize, didn't express satisfaction at Vincent's downfall. He simply told the truth and let readers draw their own conclusions. The article ran under the headline, "Vincent Ham's Legacy, Fraud, Abuse, and One Father's Fight for His Son." It went viral. Public opinion, already turning against Vincent, became a tidal wave. Social media lit up with stories of others who'd encountered Vincent Ham over the years, his cruelty, his racism, his arrogance. The consensus was clear. The man was getting exactly what he deserved. Through it all, Max focused on Tommy. They kept their routines, their normal life. Max explained, in age-appropriate terms, that Grandpa Vincent had broken laws and would face consequences. Tommy accepted this with the simple clarity of childhood. People should follow the rules, Tommy said seriously. They should, Max agreed. And if they don't, they get in trouble. Exactly, buddy. Melissa finally reached out in mid-July, a text message. "We need to talk." Max debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. He suggested a coffee shop in Oak Park, neutral territory. She looked terrible. The polished, put-together woman he'd married was gone, replaced by someone with dark circles under her eyes and unwashed hair, pulled into a messy ponytail. She'd lost weight, sharp angles showing where there'd been curves. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, not meeting his eyes. "What do you want, Mel?" "I wanted to apologize. For Easter. For everything." Max waited. Apologies were cheap without change. "I know what I did was wrong. I should have protected Tommy. I should have stood up to my father." Her hands twisted around her coffee cup. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to know I see it now. How messed up everything was. What changed? Was it the FBI arresting your father? The custody ruling? Losing access to the family money? She flinched. All of it. I've been living in this bubble where my father was perfect, where his way was the right way. But he's not perfect. He's a criminal. And I enabled him by never questioning anything. Max studied her, looking for the woman he'd fallen in love with 9 years ago. She was still in there somewhere, buried under years of Vincent Ham's influence and her own bad choices. Mel, I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. You put your father before your son. You stood by while he was hurt. That's not something I can forget. I know. Tears ran down her face. Can I see Tommy? I know the order says supervised visits, but the order says what it says for a reason. You can see him with supervision. I won't deny you that. But you need to earn his trust back and mine. That takes time. How much time? However long it takes. Max stood to leave, then paused. Mel, get therapy. Real therapy. Work through whatever made you think your father's approval was more important than your son's safety. Because until you do that, you're not going to be the mother Tommy needs. The trial began in September with jury selection. Max didn't attend. He had no desire to sit in a courtroom watching Vincent's slow-motion collapse. But he followed the coverage. Rex went most days, reporting back in the evenings over dinner. Herbert testified today, Rex said one night. Took apart Vincent's defense point by point. The jury was riveted. How's Vincent holding up? Badly. He's lost weight, looks 10 years older. His lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor won't budge. She wants to send a message about white-collar crime. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Documents, recordings, witness testimony from dozens of people Vincent had wronged. His lawyers tried to argue ignorance, claimed Vincent didn't understand the technical aspects of real estate law, suggested Herbert had acted without his father's knowledge. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all 12 counts. Sentencing was set for November. The prosecutor was recommending 12 years in federal prison, no parole. Vincent Ham, who'd spent his life looking down on others from his River Forest estate, was going to spend his 70s in a 6x8 cell. Max felt nothing when he heard the verdict. No satisfaction, no joy, just a quiet sense that the universe had balanced itself somehow. Vincent had hurt people for decades and finally faced consequences. That was all. But Tommy deserved to know justice had been served. Grandpa Vincent is going to jail for a long time, Max explained that evening. Because he broke a lot of laws, and when you break laws, there are consequences. Tommy nodded seriously. Will he hit anyone else? No, buddy. He won't. Good. The sentencing hearing in November brought closure. Judge Patricia Brennan, the same judge who'd ruled on Max's custody case, delivered a scathing statement before imposing sentence. Mr. Ham, you had every advantage in life. Wealth, education, opportunity. You could have used those advantages to help others, to build something positive. Instead, you chose to exploit, discriminate, and defraud. You hurt your own tenants, betrayed your investors, and failed to protect your own grandson. Your crimes weren't crimes of desperation or necessity. They were crimes of greed and arrogance. She sentenced Vincent Ham to 15 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, and ordered restitution of $4.3 million to his victims. With his age and health, it was essentially a life sentence. Wanda Ham filed for divorce the same week. She'd get nothing. The assets were seized, the property sold to pay restitution and fines. The woman who'd laughed when her husband hit her grandson would spend her remaining years in a small apartment, living on Social Security. Herbert Ham rebuilt quietly. He started a new real estate consultancy, ethical and transparent, working to restore the family name. Max respected that. Herbert had made mistakes, but was trying to atone. Melissa continued her supervised visits with Tommy. Slowly, tentatively, she began rebuilding a relationship with her son. She got therapy, moved into a modest apartment, found work at a nonprofit. It wasn't the life she'd expected, but maybe it was the life she needed. Christmas came, the first in their new life. Max and Tommy decorated a tree together, baked cookies, watched holiday movies. Rex joined them for dinner. Ham, ironically, and they laughed at the poor choice until tears ran down their faces. "You did good, son," Rex said later, while Tommy showed off his new Lego set. "You protected your boy, stood up for what's right. I'm proud of you. I learned from you, Dad. Maybe, but you made your own choices. That takes courage." On Christmas morning, Tommy opened his presents with the unself-conscious joy of a kid who felt safe, who knew he was loved. Max watched his son and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or just the knowledge that he'd done the right thing, even when it was hard. The Morrison Tower opened to the public in January, gleaming steel and glass against Chicago's winter sky. Max brought Tommy to the grand opening, and they stood on the observation deck 47 stories up, looking out at the city. "You made this, Dad." "I designed it. A lot of people built it. It's awesome." Tommy pressed his face against the glass. "When I grow up, can I design buildings too?" "You could do anything you want, buddy. Anything." That night, Max's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He almost deleted it, then decided to read it first. "This is Herbert Ham. I wanted to thank you for not destroying me along with my father. I know what he did to Tommy. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be better. Herbert." Max stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. Good luck, Max." Life moved forward. Max took on new projects, bigger and more ambitious than ever. His reputation grew, not just as a talented architect, but as someone who stood up for what was right, who protected the vulnerable, who didn't let powerful people intimidate him. Tommy thrived. He made friends, excelled at school, grew taller and more confident. The scared little boy who'd been slapped at Easter dinner was becoming someone stronger, someone who understood that adults weren't infallible, that standing up for yourself mattered, that family meant people who protected you, not hurt you. Melissa earned back some trust, eventually graduating to unsupervised visits. She'd never be the mother Tommy needed full-time, but she was trying, and that counted for something. Max even felt a flicker of sympathy for her sometimes. She'd been raised by Vincent Ham, after all. That kind of childhood left scars. In March, Max got a call from Santos Salas. They'd stayed in touch, occasionally meeting for coffee or Cubs games. Santos had become a friend, in his own quiet way. "Thought you'd want to know," Santos said. "Vincent Ham had a heart attack in prison yesterday. He's in the hospital, not expected to make it." Max absorbed this. "Should I feel something? That's up to you. But if you're asking my opinion, no. Some men live bad lives and die bad deaths. That's not on you to fix or feel guilty about." Vincent Ham died the next day, alone in a prison hospital. The obituaries were brief, focused on his crimes rather than his accomplishments. Wanda didn't hold a funeral. There was no one left to attend. Max told Tommy that Grandpa Vincent had died. Tommy asked if they should be sad. Max said it was okay to feel whatever he felt, or to feel nothing at all. "I feel nothing," Tommy said after thinking about it. "Is that bad?" "No, buddy. That's honest." Summer brought Tommy's 8th birthday. They had a party at the house. Rex, a dozen of Tommy's friends from school, Dr. Patel, who'd become a family friend. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Watching his son blow out candles, surrounded by people who loved him, Max thought about the journey that had brought them here. The painful marriage, the divorce, the battle for custody, the destruction of Vincent Ham's empire. It had been necessary, all of it, but Max was glad it was over. He learned things about himself during those months. That he was stronger than he'd thought. That he could be ruthless when he needed to be. That protecting Tommy was worth any cost, any sacrifice, any enemy. But more than that, he'd learned that you didn't have to be a victim. That systems could be changed, that powerful people could fall, that justice wasn't just an abstract concept, but something you could fight for and win. Rex found him in the kitchen later, cleaning up wrapping paper. "Good party." "Yeah. Thanks for the Lego set, by the way. That thing's going to keep him busy for months." That was the idea. Rex helped bag the trash. "How are you doing, son?" "Really? I'm good, Dad. Better than good, actually. No regrets." Max thought about it. The revenge had been satisfying. Seeing Vincent fall had brought closure, and Tommy was safe. That was what mattered most. But the best part, the part Max hadn't anticipated, was this. He'd rebuilt his life into something authentic. No more pretending. No more walking on eggshells. No more compromising himself to keep peace in a marriage that was already dead. No regrets. Max said, "I'd do it all again exactly the same way." That's because you're a good man. Max, good men protect their kids. They stand up to bullies. They fight for what's right even when it's hard. Rex squeezed his shoulder. "Your mother will be proud of you." "I know I am." Later, after guests had left and Tommy was in bed, clutching his new Lego spaceship, Max stood on his back porch watching the sun set over Oak Park. The Victorian house that had felt like a cage when Melissa lived there had become a home. His home. Tommy's home. Somewhere across town, the Morrison Tower caught the last light of day, its glass facade glowing gold. Max's legacy, his mark on the city. But this house, this life, this son sleeping peacefully upstairs, this was what really mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Samantha Browning. "Final divorce decree signed. It's official. Congratulations on your freedom." Max smiled. Freedom. That's exactly what it was. He texted back. "Thanks for everything, Sam. Couldn't have done it without you." The response came immediately. "You did the hard part. I just filed the paperwork. Enjoy your life, Max. You earned it." He had earned it. Every moment of peace, every laugh with Tommy, every morning without tension, every evening without walking on eggshells. He'd fought for it, planned for it, executed it perfectly. Vincent Ham had thought his money and status made him untouchable. He'd learned, too late, that some things mattered more than wealth. Max went inside, locked the door, checked on Tommy one last time. His son slept with the blanket pulled up to his chin, a small smile on his face. Safe, loved, protected. That's what fathers did. They protected their children from monsters, even when the monsters wore expensive suits and lived in big houses. They taught their sons that standing up for what's right mattered more than keeping the peace. They showed them that justice wasn't just a concept, but something worth fighting for. And sometimes, Max thought, climbing in his own bed, sometimes good men won. Not because the universe was fair, it wasn't. Not because the system worked, it often didn't. But because some people refused to roll over, refused to accept that money and status meant you could hurt others without consequences. Because some people were willing to fight dirty when necessary, to use every tool available, to be patient and strategic and absolutely ruthless in protecting what mattered. Vincent Ham had spent his life believing he was untouchable. Max Stone had proven him wrong. That was worth a little ruthlessness. That was worth everything. As Max drifted off to sleep, he thought about tomorrow. There was a new project starting at the firm, a school in an underserved neighborhood. Rex had mentioned taking Tommy to a Cubs game next weekend. Melissa had asked, tentatively, if she could take Tommy for ice cream on Saturday. Normal life. Good life. The life Max had built from the wreckage of his marriage and the ashes of Vincent Ham's empire. He slept well that night, and every night after, because he'd done what needed to be done, protected who needed protecting, and ensured that one entitled, abusive man finally faced consequences for a lifetime of cruelty. In the end, that was enough. That was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.